The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Anchia.
Chair recognizes Mr. Anchia to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I want to talk about a part of this bill that you might not be paying attention to. We have investments that come to the state of Texas
Members, please take your conversations out to the rail.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Texas is the #1 state in the country for foreign direct investment. Okay, we have more foreign direct investment than even California. It's really important to all of our business climate that there is regulatory predictability when people make investments in the state of Texas. Okay, there's a piece of this bill that empowers the Attorney General to investigate when land is purchased, right? My amendment is very simple. It says that if you have gone through the very rigorous federal process at CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., that you do not then get an Attorney General investigation. It is a safe harbor that is designed to provide you and your investment predictability. Because what happens when you're putting together your loan agreement, when you're putting together your equity, you are representing, you are warranting, and then you're giving a covenant that you have done everything possible and you have checked every regulatory box possible. But what if you have this contingent liability, even after you've gone through CFIUS, that a politically elected Attorney General can investigate you? It creates business risk, okay? And I'll just offer you a quick scenario that is not very far-fetched, okay? CFIUS, of course, is composed of very serious people. It's the Department of Treasury, and that's where it's housed, and the chair is the chair of the Committee on Foreign Investment. You have the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, Department of State, Energy, USTR, the Office of Science and Technology, and then you're joined by members of the White House, which is OMB, the Council of Economic Advisors, the National Security Council, the National Economic Council, and the Homeland Security Council. That is who reviews the transaction. Once you go through that very rigorous process, you will be able to avoid the Attorney General re-review of that process. Why is this important? Because all of those are career and very serious people. They are looking at the transaction, they're reviewing the transaction from perspective of science and technology, national security, etc. Imagine if you had a Republican administration and you had a Democratic Attorney General here in Texas, all right? That Attorney General will be political in nature. Even if your investment will have gone through CFIUS, an Attorney General from the opposite party of the administration, what is your incentive to sign off on that? You will have none. Political people will act politically. And they will, of course, open up an investigation. And what does that do to regulatory certainty in the state?
Mr. Speaker.
What does it do to your transaction?
Mr. Busey, for what purpose?
I'll wait a second.
It blows up your deal, right? We have a company that is facing, a company in Texas that is facing this very issue. They are a world leader in general aviation. They're based in McKinney, Texas. All the American labor is 100%. The supply chain, 96% American, 4% European. They've invested $10 million in Texas, and they're set to invest $15 million more. They just went through the National Security Review at CFIUS with very serious people, and their transaction was approved. Why would we want to layer on top of that a political review? It makes no sense. And just put aside for a moment that the federal government has a lot more resources at the Homeland Security Council, at the National Economic Council, at the National Security Council, the Council of Economic Advisors, to actually do the work of reviewing the transaction. Put that aside for a minute. But let's just think about what a political process would do injected in this situation. So if the political winds are moving in one direction, guess what? I'm the elected Attorney General here. I may, in fact, act politically. We've had an Attorney General that says their job was to wake up in the morning and sue the president. What if that shoe was on the other foot? That negatively impacts the business climate in this state, members. So I would please ask you to consider those factors. If a transaction has already been approved by CFIUS, we are not going to subject it to a process by an elected official that might act politically in this state because it hurts regulatory certainty.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Busey, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for a few questions?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
Yes.
The gentleman yields.
I think our colleagues need to understand that if we don't pass this amendment, as you just outlined for everyone here, that we could have political interference on the Texas economy. Can you explain the economic impact of foreign investment in the state of Texas, the 8th largest economy in the world?
So look, yes, we are the 8th largest economy in the world. We're one of the leading destinations. I think I misspoke earlier. I think we're number 2 in the United States for foreign direct investment. We're one of the leading destinations for foreign-owned companies. They employ nearly 700,000 workers across the state. And according to, according to the governor's office, we are number 1.
Yeah, I think Governor Greg Abbott says we're number 1.
Yep. The governor correctly points out that we are number 1 in foreign direct investment. And in the last 10 years, we've attracted almost 2,000, about 1,850 new foreign direct investment projects. And that's expected to raise almost $200 billion in economic activity.
Representative, are you aware that in 2022, Governor Abbott's office said thanks to trading and investment partners like China, Texas upholds its reputation as a leader in the global economy?
Yes.
The Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States is responsible for reviewing certain transactions to determine impacts national security. Isn't that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And you're trying to make sure that if that thorough process goes through, we don't allow whatever political party we have, the AG, interfere with a important project for our economy. And we can protect that by passing your amendment. Wouldn't that be correct?
Representative Busey, I'll put even a finer point on it. The people at the NSC, at the NSA, have trained their entire careers to do this work. And we are going to let them get second-guessed here?
I think our colleagues are tuning out, and I want them to understand this process, because in the layout, not by you, but of the bill author, that we were led to believe that this was maybe not a thorough process. So I've written down the process, and I want to walk us through. As part of these reviews, they look at classified and unclassified intelligence reports, law enforcement databases, public records and financial disclosures, international sanctions and export control databases. They go on to review ties to foreign governments, military, intelligence services, criminal records, sanctions, export control violations, and foreign investment history. CFIUS uses classified assessments from the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, the intelligence community, including the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the NSA, and the CIA. And they specifically evaluate things as they're going through that thorough process, such as whether the land is near a military base, port, or a defense facility, if the transaction could allow espionage, surveillance, or disruption, and the risk of foreign control over critical infrastructure or technologies. And in doing these evaluations, they also take into consideration if the home country's relationship to the United States. So if we don't pass your amendment, we are to believe that that process is inadequate, and since this has to be a question from the back mic, are we to believe then that if we don't pass your amendment, the people of this body are saying that that's an inadequate process, but the political whims of an attorney general would be more adequate?
Look, I'd like to think that attorney generals would act in non-political ways, but we see examples every day of politicians acting politically. And let's not discuss, a position. But if you had people in two different parties, what is it going to do to regulatory certainty of the state? And let's assume for a minute that we were able to stand up the type of infrastructure. Let's assume for a minute that this body said, we're going to stand up that exact infrastructure, all that human capital, all that expertise in the Attorney General's office. You still have the problem of an elected official acting politically.
If we want the Texas economy to thrive, we need to pass this amendment. Thank you for bringing it. Let's not give in to the whims of the political
I
operators of the
appreciate
Attorney
that.
General. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Busey, for those questions. This is, honestly, it's been a pretty discouraging process because even some very obvious things are not being adopted. This one should be very obvious to everybody.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes Mr. Hefner in opposition to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate Representative Anchia. I don't want to have to depend on the federal government to decide who does business here safely and according to our law. The divestiture process is not a political process. There's an entire system of due process, and you could very much have political influence from the CFIUS process because they're all appointed by politicians and elected officials. So, with respect, move to
Mr. Speaker.
table the amendment.
Mr. Anchia.
Will the gentleman yield for a few questions?
The gentleman has moved to table. The gentleman temporarily withdraws his motion to table. Mr. Anchia, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for some questions?
The gentleman yield.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for taking my questions, Representative. I wanted to ask you about a statement you made during your layout where you said CFIUS has some holes in it. Those were your words. I wrote them down. Can you describe those holes for the body?
Look, CFIUS is something that was created, a long time ago in the 50s. It's a federal process. I don't want the state to have to depend on or wait on or refer to the federal government. I want Texas to be able to take care of Texas.
Okay. Can you describe the holes in the process that you described?
I'm not an expert on the CFIUS process, on the
you
step-by-step
said,
process.
hey, it's federal.
I know that
We don't want to
had-
rely on them, but what are the holes in the existing process that would not catch things that you would want the Attorney General to catch?
Well, it's a voluntary process. We've had some large land purchases in the country and in this state that went around the CFIUS process. And
Are your-
yeah, whether or not, whatever the process looks like, I don't want us to have to depend on that process. It is going to be a political process no matter what because those people that are on the CFIUS committee are appointed by elected officials.
Okay. Are your concerns or are the holes in the process
My
that
concern-
exist before or after FIRMA?
My concerns with the CFIUS process is my sincere distrust of the federal government.
Are you
And,
familiar with FIRMA?
No, sir, I'm not.
Okay. FIRMA is the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act that was passed by Congress and signed in 2010 by President Trump. Okay?
In
It was
2010 by
designed,
President
sorry,
Trump?
I apologize. I misread that. 2018 by President Trump. And it was the update to the CFIUS process, right? And it expanded the scope of covered transactions. All right? And then there's been quite a bit of rulemaking done as a result of that places additional scrutiny on military bases where real property is purchased. You don't want to depend on the federal government. Are you concerned that there are holes in this law that was signed by President Trump in 2018?
I'm concerned with my distrust and the dysfunction of the federal government, and Trump's not always going to be in office, whether we like him or not. That's going to change in 4 years, and I want Texas to be able to take care of Texas and not have to depend on what happens in Washington.
So that includes, in 2018 when CFIUS was modernized by President Trump, you distrust that. You distrust the system currently in place. Is that correct?
I distrust the federal government. I'm not aware
Period.
of
Period. Okay.
Sure, of course. Don't you?
Okay. Let me ask you about how your bill deals with standing up the different components of the Attorney General's office so that it can do this work. What additional FTEs are going to be required in the Attorney General's office to do investigations?
You know, my staff met with employees of the Attorney General's office. They currently have systems for other types of reports, and they would just simply set up a portal for this. We were not advised of any additional FTEs.
Do you know how many
required.
investigators they have on foreign investment?
I'm not advised.
Do you know how many lawyers they have on foreign investment?
I'm not advised. This law is not
Do
in
you
effect, so they
believe-
may not have any on this specific issue.
Right,
But they
but do you
have lawyers
believe-
that are fully capable. I have
You
full faith
believe
and
that they
trust in them.
have the capabilities, the same kind of capabilities as the National Economic Council or Homeland Security Council, the Council of Economic Advisors? You're confident of that?
I do believe, and I'm confident that we have lawyers and those in the Attorney General's office that are fully capable of carrying out these investigations and enforcing this law.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Wu, for what purpose?
will the gentleman yield for questions?
Gentleman yield for questions.
Of course.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Hefner, the point of this legislation is about national security and the security of the state, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you recognize that there's many things involved in national security that are probably classified. Is that fair?
Yes.
Intelligence reports, whether secret, top secret, or higher levels,
I would assume.
okay? And you have to have national security level access to those.
If they're classified, yes.
Does anything in your bill grant the state of Texas, an employee of the state of Texas, whether it's the Attorney General, one of his people, grant them access, to grant them national security access?
Well, my bill does it calls on the Attorney General's office to set in place processes for investigation of these types of instances. It gives them pretty broad authority, and that's on purpose.
I'm sorry, I worded that badly. Does anything in your bill give the Attorney General access to national security or classified information?
We're not talking about the state accessing top secret information or classified information. We're talking about us doing our own investigation and making our own determination based on the facts that the investigation spells out.
Does your bill give access to the Attorney General, give them access to national security intelligence?
My bill equips the Attorney General's office to set up the practices and the processes that he sees fit to thoroughly investigate violations of this law.
Is any of that access to national security information?
Maybe, I don't know.
You don't know if your bill says that you get a national security access or not?
The bill gives him broad authority and broad permission to set up processes.
And that's what I'm
for these
asking about.
investigations.
Does that broad authority include national security access?
I'm not advised. I don't know. We're not
you
talking
don't
about-
know if your bill
This is the state of Texas. This isn't
gives
the federal
access?
government. We're talking about the state of Texas, the state attorney general,
Does
and
anything
the
in your
Texas
bill?
House of Representatives passing a bill to protect Texas.
Does
so
your-
I'm not an expert on national security and classified information. I don't have to be.
Absolutely, that's kind of the point, right?
Whose point?
That people in the state levels don't have access to national security unless you have a national security clearance.
Okay.
Would you agree that much of the information about foreign adversaries, about foreign nations, about people that we're concerned about, that kind of information is included in data, in analysis, in intelligence that is at the national level, national security level?
Sure, and there's also a lot of information that's going to be in property records and business records and business filings and LLCs and LPs and all these things. So the Attorney General will have the authority and the permission to set up processes to fully investigate these instances. Plain and simple. It's not that complicated.
Do you believe that county property records are more illustrative of national security risks than national security intelligence.
You said county who?
County property records that you just mentioned.
County property records? Or they,
Does that tell us more about a risk to our nation or our state than national intelligence?
I guess it would depend on the investigation and what we were looking at.
What
we-
would the Attorney General be looking at?
He'll be looking for evidence that these people are acting on behalf of foreign adversaries.
So
If a complaint is filed, and if an investigation is open, and if the evidence leads to this process.
do you think the county property records would give information about what someone was doing in another country?
I think everything will be at the disposal that is appropriate to be investigated. That could be county property records, that could be state records. I don't know. That's not for me to
You-
decide, that's for the Attorney General, who are
You don't
experts in
know-
investigations.
You don't know if county property records will tell you about
They could be a
people's
piece of the-
activities in other
Representative,
countries?
they could be a piece of the investigation. I don't know what you're trying, I don't know what this got
The
you. You're trying to
gentleman's
do.
time has expired.
Mr. Speaker, I asked to extend the time.
Is there objection to the extension of time? The extension is granted.
Right.
Mr. Hefner,
Yes, sir.
on one hand, we have an organization made up of all of the concerned national level departments and agencies who have in their prerogative national security. And they are looking at this information with access to national intelligence.
Okay.
Do you believe
They can still do that, by the way.
I'm sorry?
They can still do everything they do. They can do all that. That doesn't mean we can't take care of Texas.
And so
by
what
God,
you're
that's
saying-
what we're going to do.
What you're saying is the Attorney General, without access to national security data, without access to what people were doing in other countries, are going to make judgments about those people based on their records here, local records.
You keep hung up on local records. There's many other facets to an investigation.
Please
and
tell
I don't
us.
know what the Attorney General is going to be looking at. He's going to be looking at whatever he can to make the case if there's a case, and if there's not, he'll move on.
Look at state traffic records, traffic tickets.
I don't know. Maybe.
Does the Attorney General have any access to investigate overseas?
He'll have broad authority to set up processes to investigate these instances to the fullest extent of the law.
I understand you don't know if your bill grants
I'm
him
not
access.
the Attorney General, Mr.
I'm sorry.
Wu. You maybe
Can
should
I
ask
finish
the
my
Attorney
question?
General's office.
Please allow me to finish my question. I understand that you don't know whether your bill grants national security access to the Attorney General. Do you know or not know whether your bill grants authority to the Texas Attorney General to act in another country?
My bill authorizes the Attorney General to act within his constitutional duties for the state of Texas.
Does that include
I'm not
activities in
advised.
other nations?
It's whatever his authorities are under the Constitution of this state and the United States. It's whatever that is.
So you're saying that even though somebody has gone through a rigorous process involving our national government, involving agencies that are involved, whose tasks and duties are national security, after they have been cleared by that group, you're saying Texas can still find something better with your property records?
Possibly, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Morgan,
Does the gentleman yield for questions?
would you yield, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Hefner? He will, Mr. Morgan.
So we just heard a lot about the federal government. Isn't it true the federal government let 10 million illegal aliens into our state?
I'm not advised on the exact number. It could be higher than that.
Could be higher than that, right? So doesn't this bill help address that those people that entered this country illegally aren't buying land in our state from hostile nations?
It could affect some of those people purchasing properties. The bill could.
Mr. Morgan, would you please keep your questions to the amendment that's before us?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, I thank you for bringing this bill and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. to table. Move to table.
Mr. Anchia to close.
Hold on, I get to close. Hold on a second. Thank you, members. That was an enlightening exchange that we just had, and I just want to recap it for you. I appreciate the bill author pointing out that he is not an expert in CFIUS. I will not, I stipulate that I am not either, but I've spent a lot of time studying it. And the Trump administration updated CFIUS in 2018 because of concerns about threats, right? And they passed the they signed the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act that expanded the jurisdiction of the Committee on Foreign Investment of the United States to address growing national security concerns over foreign exploitation of certain investment structures, which traditionally had fallen outside of CFIUS jurisdiction. So the covered transactions included proximity to sensitive government facilities, change in foreign investors' rights resulting in foreign control of a U.S. business or other business, etc. Pretty thorough. And the people who are on CFIUS, and I think you heard the debate, are very serious. So let me give you a hypothetical that I think is very relevant to all of us. Your Chamber of Commerce is working with a company to set up manufacturing in your community. They're going to spend tens of millions of dollars. That company has gone through the CFIUS process, has submitted the 800 to 1,000 pages worth of documents. It's been reviewed by Department of Treasury, Department of Justice, Homeland Security, Commerce, National Security Council, National Economic Council, Homeland Security Council, among others. And you've got the investors of this manufacturing plant have their equity together. They've put their financing, their debt financing together, and they're going to break ground. The Attorney General says, I, under this bill, am initiating an investigation. And I just need to have a reason to believe. The Attorney General has a reason to believe whether this transaction is a problem. There's no time frame in here on when they need to finish the investigation. That investment is dead. It's not coming to your community. It's ball game. And that's why states like North Dakota have provisions. North Dakota and Tennessee have both included provisions just like this to make sure that there's regulatory certainty for foreign investors in one's community.
Mr. McLaughlin, for what purpose?
Would the gentleman yield for a
Would
question?
you yield, Mr. Anchia?
I would.
You'll
I
be
would to my
happy to.
esteemed colleague, Representative McLaughlin.
The question I want to ask is, you talk about our government doing a real good job. Not far from me, a Chinese national has bought 140,000 acres of land that surround Laughlin Air Force Base and is also trying to build an electrical system to get on our grid system. I don't think our federal government
Did that investment go through CFIUS? Do you know?
I do not know.
Okay.
But I mean, our federal government is...
But
let that slip through
conceivably,
through
the example
cracks.
you just brought up had gone through a rigorous CFIUS review and was approved.
Well, I know all the federal government, Senator Corn, Cruz, all of them now don't want that project
You're
to
making
go
my
on.
point, I guess, that if they had gone through a very rigorous review and it was approved by the NSA, by way of example, by Treasury, by Commerce, right? Political people will do political things if there's an outcry, right?
But if you use shell companies to buy this, then you circumvent.
Are you familiar with FIRMA?
Huh?
Are you familiar with FIRMA?
I'm not.
Okay. That is I was just discussing it, the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act of 2018, okay? And the provisions of, it was signed by President Trump, the provisions of FIRMA deal with purchase, lease, concessions. They deal with other investments, including investments in U.S. businesses, to your point, shell companies, in proximity to sensitive government facilities, that gives you access to sensitive material non-public technical information, so like trade secrets, and also covers any change in a foreign investor's rights resulting from foreign control in a third-party company or a U.S. company, okay? And it also covers any other transfer, transaction, agreement, or arrangement that circumvents the jurisdiction of CFIUS, like a shell company. Okay, so that is covered by federal law that was signed by President Trump.
Well, I understand it may have been signed by President Trump, but under the last administration, we didn't do anything to stop any of this. Whether we use this deal or not, we didn't.
That may be your opinion, but you also have acknowledged from the back microphone that you do not know whether this particular investment went through the CFIUS process.
I don't.
I don't either. I don't either.
Well, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative. So members, I will end it there, but just ask you to vote for regulatory certainty, for a very rigorous process that already vets these investments, and really for continued foreign direct investment in the state of Texas. Thank you for your time today. I move adoption.
Chair recognizes.
I'm sorry. I ask that you oppose the motion to table. I apologize.
A record vote has been requested on the motion to table. Vote aye if you're in favor of the motion to table. Vote nay if you're opposed. It's a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Hunter voting aye. You're right. They got you. Show Mr. Hefner voting aye. Show Mr. Troxler voting aye. Have all members voted? Being 81 ayes, 60 nays, the motion to table passes.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Wu, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I raise a point of order against further consideration of SB 17 against under Rule 11, Section 2 of the House rules on grounds that the committee substitute is not germane to the original bill.
Bring your point of order forward, please, sir.